Hello and welcome to our latest Culture Pioneers conversation, where we're going to be focusing on the HR operating model and why we may need to bid farewell to it and make space for something new. I'm Becky Norman, I'm the Managing Editor of HR Zone, and today I'm really delighted to be joined by one of our Culture Pioneers partners, David Liddle, CEO of the TCM Group and President of the People and Culture Association. So David is a globally renowned authority in the fields of mediation, conflict management, HR, people and culture, among many other fields as well. And in 2025, this year, he was recognised as HR's most influential thinker by HR Magazine. He's also the author of 2 highly acclaimed books, and he is working on 2 more, very busy, due to be published in 2026. And one of those, which is called People and Culture, is what we're going to be talking about a little bit more today. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, Becky, you're welcome. It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. So in your new book, you introduce a new operating model for HR and leaders that focuses on people and culture. Before we explore that new model, which I'm really excited to do, what is it about our existing models that are outdated and ineffective for today's workplace?
Yeah, no, thanks, Becky, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm really grateful. I think the first observation I've had around the sort of HR systems and processes is that many of them were designed for a sort of period of time where we had a situation in our organizations which was often driven by control, power, authority, management, hierarchy, structure within our organizations. And the management systems and HR processes of the past were often designed to manage risk. The employee we often saw as a risk, the risk of litigation, the risk of reputational damage within our organizations. So many HR processes are designed as a risk mitigation process, not as an enabler of flourishing, high-performing, productive working relationships or individuals. And they're embedded within that as a risk mitigation strategy is a focus on retribution, blame and punishment and sanction, often centered around a reductive model of justice, which is about right, wrong, win, lose. And we seek to investigate a particular set of circumstances to identify a wrongdoer in order to be able to apply a sanction or an approach. And many of those systems of retribution and thinking around here, grievance processes, disciplinary, bullying, harassment, whistleblowing, even performance management capability, conduct. So many of those people processes, when we step back and look at those processes through the lens of compassion, dialogue, engagement, insight, learning, the kind of things that people tell me are really important about good workplaces. Dialogue, listening to understand, the things that we need to create positive, productive spaces to be the best version of ourselves, they are in absentia through many of the systems and processes that we've had designed and developed, what I call the legacy systems. So what I'm trying to do through the text, and I've done in my previous 2 texts, is shine a light on the problems of the legacy systems, which are centered around risk mitigation and retributive, punitive, sanctions-based systems for resolving problems, and simply offer up another way of delivering just and fair and inclusive people policies, which are fully aligned and fully integrated to those concepts of good work and good workplaces, fairness and justice, inclusion, insight and learning and compassion. And I guess you could describe the book in very simple terms as you can have your cake and eat it strategy. We can still do risk mitigation and accountability, but we can be empathetic and compassionate. So accountability and compassion are not diametrically opposed. We can do both of those. And when the people function is delivering accountability and compassion and empathy and structure and rigor together, that positions the people function in many respects as strategically one of the most important functions in our workplaces. I guess that's what I'm focusing on in the new book, is how do we shift the dial from those unitarist perspectives of working relationships to a more transformational perspective as the kind that I'm describing.
Thank you for that. And can you identify a moment in time when you know, before this book was even an idea, really, when you felt like something needs to change here? Was there like a straw that broke the camel's back where you felt, you know, I actually need to write this important book to kind of drive the profession in the right direction?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can go back a long way. So my background is in mediation and restorative justice, as you highlighted. So my first degree was in race relations. So I was very interested in anti-racism and exclusion, discrimination in all of its forms. And then I ran a charity specialising in anti-violence, non-violence, and anti-bullying in schools and in prisons and in communities. So when I set foot into the workplaces in 2001, having done an MBA, I thought, right, yeah, let's go in and start having a big conversation in our organisations about how to handle conflicts and disputes. And the overall approach I saw in 2001, Becky, was utterly woeful and totally inadequate. It was horrendous. The systems that we deployed were centred around avoiding dealing with issues. And when we couldn't avoid them anymore, we were throwing money at them. The checkbooks were out. And the systems and processes were centered around extensive inaction or expensive overreaction. And what organizations did is they brought me in, and I became, in my own view, the corporate band-aid. I'd be wheeled into the basement with a Hessian sack over my head. You're not allowed to talk about it. And what I found through my work as a mediator and a restorative practitioner is it was people were embarrassed to talk about conflict. People were embarrassed to talk about mediation. The systems and processes were causing incredible levels of trauma and harm to employees within our workplaces. There was a complete, total, abject failure of intervention within line management population, within the HR processes. Then the HR processes that were being deployed were like pouring petrol onto the fire. And then everyone was, what's going on? It's like, well, the systems and processes are so broken. 10 years I did it, Becky. 10 years I was in hospitals, universities, police forces, banks, insurance companies. And it was in 2013, I realized I'd literally had enough. I couldn't do any more of this. I realized that as a mediator, I did some exciting and very groundbreaking work. I was setting up in-house mediation programs and doing accredited training. But the bottom line for me around that period, around the Olympics period it was, and I remember it very clearly, I was doing some really interesting work with some organisations around the Olympics. And I realised I was the corporate band-aid. I was coming, I was protecting the interests of the HR and management function within the organisations, and I was masking all of these problems that were going on upstream. And I really did feel very compelled to do something. So my first objective was to say that the grievance procedure was causing more grief and worry and fear than the actual issues that gave rise to the grievance procedure in the first place. So in 2013, pretty much giving up on the whole landscape of employee relations and feeling it was broken and harmful, and not just to people who experience it, to the people who are administering it, Becky. It was breaking the ER specialists and the business partners who were administering these processes. They were worn out. They were tired. They were on this hamster wheel of blame and punishment and stress and inertia and people going on. It was genuinely awful and costly and damaging. So yeah, that period then I went down to the Law Society with a shredder. I was based up in Hatton Garden, the jewellery district in London. And I had a massive, remember these massive shredding machines that you had in your offices? Of course, we had a lot of confidential information coming through the business. So we needed a big shredder. So I got the shredder, it was on wheels, and I wheeled it down, literally wheeled the shredding machine down Hatton Garden to Chancery Lane to the Law Society. And we'd worked with the Law Society, so they gave us their big hall for free. And I forgot to take a grievance procedure with me. So I had to get the Law Society's fire evacuation plan and hurriedly scribble grievance procedure on it. And I literally picked it up and shredded it. And at that moment in time, this was a real moment for me. You could hear the hushes and what the heck's this guy doing? This is a foundational core policy in our employee handbook. This is a core legal requirement for us to have. No, it isn't, by the way. This is a core function within the workplace in terms of good governance, legal compliance, consistency. And I shredded it. And what I set out to the audience, there's about 100 people there. I said, now you don't have this policy, what would you put in its stead and what would it look like? And suddenly there were murmurs around empathy, dialogue, early resolution, mediation, coaching. And what I said is, look, let's now take all of those principles of good employee relations and HR. Let's bring back in consistency and compliance and governance and legal requirements, but let's balance those against the needs of our workforce and of our managers. And let's change the dial from grievance to resolution. So when I launched the resolution policy, which then became the resolution framework, that was the groundbreaking moment for me, because I realized that we had grown up in our organizations and inherited a bunch of policies and procedures that no one was challenging. They sat on our employee handbooks and our intranet sites, gathering dust sometimes, or being weaponized by people within the organization. And not one person, and I did enjoy being that one person, I'm not going to lie, I did enjoy going and saying, do you know, it doesn't have to be this way. It can be better and it can be different, and you can have your cake and eat it. You can have accountability, compliance, consistency, and regulatory controls, and do the right thing by your people. And suddenly these light bulbs were coming on all over the place. And at that moment, to me, was a career defining moment. And my career shifted from putting out fires with a Hessian sack over my head in the basement to getting up to the 8th floor boardroom and having big conversations with people leaders about the kind of organizations they wanted. And that was to me a great moment in time. And I look at it very fondly. Yeah.
I never thought the answer to that question was going to involve a shredder, but I absolutely love it. Must have been very cathartic doing that.
Very cathartic.
So looking now at your new function that you put out in this book, which is focused around people and culture, can we just explore top line what some of those central tenets are of this?
Absolutely. So I've written 3 books. The first one was managing conflict, and I set out what I called the HR paradox. I wasn't aware of Dave Ulrich's HR paradoxes, but I set out this paradox that HR were experiencing of wanting to be an enabling, empowering function within our workplaces, but relying on a policy framework which was dysfunctional, destructive, harmful, corrosive, pernicious, divisive, infantilizing, reductive, cause of trauma and harm. So there's this huge paradox. So the first book talked about the resolution framework, as I just did. The second book, the transformational culture text, introduced the transformational culture concept and the blueprint that I offered. And in that, I teased out the thinking around the people and culture operating model within transformational culture. So the third book now, People and Culture, really dives into what does that people and culture function look like within the workplace to help create, develop and sustain a truly transformational culture, which is driven by focus on purpose, values and people. So therein lies the first element of the shift of thinking, is like the role of the people function are the architects of our organizational culture. They are the culture catalysts. They're about putting our purpose, our people and our values at the heart of our organizations. And that isn't an existential sort of threat or in opposition to the idea of robust systems and processes. It's about aligning those and creating alignment and harmony between those. So there are 5 dimensions or 5 domains to the people and culture operating model, as I set it out in the book. The first is the people domain. It's about creating people-centered workplaces. So the concept of a nice way of thinking about it is the employee is a consumer, as a human being consuming systems and processes. So how do you engage with your people as consumers of your HR processes and your employee relations systems? So it's about engagement, proactive, listening, empathy, dialogue, connection, gaining feedback, constantly involving people in decision making, empowering them, supporting line managers and leaders to share power with the workforce rather than exercising power over them, helping our leaders and managers to think about the concepts of servant leadership. How do we serve the workforce? And of course, servant leadership principles run through much of the people and culture operating model. So the first domain is the people-centered workplace. The second domain is culture. And it's not trying to see the people function as the owner of culture in a siloed way, in a selfish way of it's our culture and everyone hands off, because that self-evidently wouldn't work. It's co-creating culture with this level of intentionality and deliberateness. So I talk about the development of a culture hub. chaired by the chief people officer or co-chaired by the CPO and the CEO, bringing in together multiple voices and multiple disciplines and stakeholders to create and sustain a culture which is fair and just, kind and compassionate, sustainable, not because that's an ideological or moral or ethical sort of focus, although they are all of those things, because they are the drivers and the antecedents of a high-performing, productive workplace. The third domain is strategy, and the role of the people function, aligning the corporate strategy and the people plan so that they become one single overarching strategic narrative, and putting culture and people and culture as the number one strategic priority in our boards and in our executive suites and our senior leadership teams and our management teams, and ensuring that rather than leaving culture to chance, culture is something which is deliberate and intentionally focused on by our leaders, how they're role modeling our values through their behaviors, how they're holding ourselves to account and others to account. Again, moving away from those avoidance or overreaction or binary or positional systems of justice, which have held our companies and businesses back for so long. We are the architects of our own problems. We create the scripts, and we're rewriting the script here. We want to change the behaviors, we want to change the outcome, we need to rewrite the script, and that's the strategic domain. The fourth domain is the justice domain. And the justice domain, I'm not talking about the tired, dreary, dusty, broken justice paradigms of yesteryear, which unfortunately still play out in so many organizations today. I'm talking about a modern form of transformative justice, which blends restorative justice, compassion and dialogue with procedural justice, distributive justice and natural justice. So there's an amalgam of 4 justice models. And I think for the people function, I often talk about justice and I say, let's unpack justice. And I am blown away by how little HR know about the concept of justice or what justice means. And a failure to understand justice, Becky, in my view, means that we subcontract justice to a bunch of broken processes. And we think that delivering justice, they're a mirage of justice. They're an illusion of fairness. And the reason that they're a mirage and an illusion is because we haven't taken the time as a function to understand what justice means. So we subcontract it. We subcontract it to managers, but we don't tell them how to do it. But we don't half blame them when it goes wrong. We use policies and processes that are broken, and then we end up in tribunals, or we expend an enormous amount of money with legal costs. And we just accept that's okay. So that's not okay. In what world is that even close to being okay? So having a conversation around the justice domain and thinking about, what does justice mean? Do we deliver justice by putting a head on a plate? Or do we deliver justice through dialogue, gaining insight, learning, meaning, and connection? And is one form of justice preferable to another, and can both coexist? This is the discourse we need to have within our HR departments and people teams right now, because if we don't have the conversation, we're getting justice wrong. And I often talk about culture, as you would imagine, and people say to me, David, if there's one word you could use to describe culture at work, what's the one word you'd use to describe? And my one response is always the same: it's justice. It's how do we deal with things when they go wrong? How do we deal with mistakes? How do we behave when no one else is watching? How do our processes resolve problems within our workplaces? Justice, justice, justice. So that's the fourth domain. And the fifth domain is a big domain. It's a really exciting and interesting domain for us to think about as people leaders, is the value domain. And how do we measure value of the organization, and the concept of the shift from the traditional value chain and wealth generation to strategic value, shareholder value, stakeholder value, and of course, social value. So we're still looking to generate profit and value within the workplace, but there are other measures of value. And this is, and what I touch on in the book is opening up a powerful conversation about how do we assess and measure and drive value as people leaders. So the people and culture operating model, people, culture, strategy, justice, and then in the center of it is value. Those 4 value measures, or values as well, values. And then I build out on from that, looking at the role that the people function can play, the different roles within the people function. I create a set of new centers of excellence. I'm a massive fan of centers of excellence or centers of expertise, but some of them are so outdated, outmoded, and just ineffectual. So how do we drive those centers of excellence and have multidisciplinary teams, cross-functional working, focusing on core topics? That AI would be one, resolution would be another, well-being, engagement, inclusion would be another, culture's another. So I take the old centres of excellence and give them a bit of a dusting down, and hopefully make them ready for the 2025, 2026 in work environment.
Bit of an upgrade.
That's the word I was looking for. A bit of an upgrade. A bit of an upgrade. Thank you.
What I'd really like to do is bring this to life with kind of looking at it through the lens of how would this change a people leader's kind of everyday working life. So I don't know, maybe we take one of those examples, such as justice. How would kind of the legacy system versus this new function work? What's the kind of key differentiators there?
Wow. I mean, I think it's a really interesting point, because we don't talk about it, but when you start to talk about it, there's this sort of sound effect. The sound effect when I had that shredding machine down in the Law Society was there's a sound effect. There's this sound effect you get within people teams around the world when you start talking about things that are really important. I'd never thought about this through in that way. So suddenly you start having conversations about the concept of justice and what it means to bring people together at moments of disagreement and discord, and how in those moments of interaction we generate curiosity, insight, learning, and growth. Now let's take those as a currency of work. So everything else can be or will be able to be automated. Maybe our ability to be innovative and creative as human beings might be automated, but let's assume that gives us a competitive advantage as a species in the workplace. Our ability to innovate and solve problems with a sort of sense of humanity and shared humanity that drives connection, and then that adds value, that solves today's problems to create tomorrow's future. What better time to do that than when we're not agreeing, when we're disagreeing, or when there's a mistake or a failure or an error, or when we err? So if we have a justice model, which is about making people feel blamed, it's retributive, I go off sick, our relationship unravels, I can't cope with it, I leave. And that the HR functions justice model, therefore, is undermining justice and undermining the value of a justice system. What people professionals say when we start the conversation is, go, that's why I came in to HR in the first place. I knew there was a reason I'm a people professional, because I genuinely believe in the power of people to resolve problems, to create new solutions for tomorrow. I see that as being an intrinsic reason why I came into the people function in however, fill the blank, however many years ago. But I've lost my way. I've lost sight of why I came in the first place. I came in to get the best from people. I came in to create spaces for them to flourish, to enable dialogue, to help problem solving, to support people. What I've, however, inherited is a set of systems where I'm late to the party, they're transactional, reactive, and destructive. So what I say to what happens very quickly when we're having these conversations is you get that, that's why I did it in the first place. That's why I'm here. That's the career I set out. That's what I want to do. So when I talk to people about the people and culture operating model, and it's not presented as a threat, we're not bashing what they've done before, we're not degrading or denigrating their incredible impact that they've had in their workplaces. It's just saying, actually, there are some shifts that we can make that take the organization forward, but it reconnects those people in HR of why they wanted to come into HR in the first place. And when I was writing the book, I spoke to 30 plus chief people officers and chief execs, and all of them spoke with passion and drive and a level of vigor and enthusiasm for their role in terms of people leadership that just absolutely blew me away. But not one of them talked about the application of process to resolve an issue. Not one of them talked about punitive sanction-based systems for resolving problems in our workplace. Not one of them was talking about getting in expensive lawyers to resolve the problems for them. They were all talking about empowering, coaching, enabling, flourishing, supporting, and that they lit a fire inside me, to be honest with you, in the same way as it did back in 2012.
I'm just wondering, I think I'm really curious to know, from interviewing that many people leaders who are kind of moving in that direction, Was there anything, I mean, you mentioned the data, for example, that data-led approach. Was there anything else, any kind of commonalities among them in terms of their mindsets, their behaviors, what they were really prioritizing that you felt was enabling them to succeed versus maybe those that are kind of stuck in that legacy kind of approach?
Yeah, I think there were two or three. The first one was I never heard anyone say value schvalues. Now, I never hear anyone say that, but you can see it in their eyes. And it shows up on a signature and it shows up on the poster on the wall. And we all know that doesn't deliver meaningful change. But how many organizations does it really stop at the lobby wall and stop on an email signature or the occasional lanyard? The first thing I would say is they were absolutely using the values as a golden thread within the organization. And one of the trends that I saw and heard so much was the connection between values, behaviors, and capabilities. So it wasn't just that the values are being talked about. It's like, how do we as leadership, population, and management community hold ourselves to account to deliver the values through our behaviors? And what do those behaviors look like? What are the behaviors that say we're doing the right thing? What are the behaviors that are aligned? I'd say we're getting this right. But what they were doing was having really powerful adult-to-adult conversations about which of the behaviors that say we're getting it wrong. And for the organizations that are getting it wrong, they rely on a set of behaviors called gross misconduct. If you steal from us or take the company's name into bad reputation, or you say anything which is harmful, that's gross misconduct. The organizations were getting it right, we're going much deeper than that. And they were saying, what are the behaviors that we don't want to see that are misaligned? And for many of the organizations, they recognize that these values and then the behaviors, the aligned behaviors and the misaligned behaviors then created a gap between the aligned and misaligned. And they were building capabilities in the gap. And they were saying that we need managers to reward and encourage and nurture and foster the aligned behaviors, coaching skills, dialogue, mediation skills to resolve conflicts effectively and constructively, giving feedback in performance conversations, rewriting our performance conversations. But they were also giving their managers the skills and leaders the skills to address the misaligned behaviors, no longer just relying on a sort of hammer in a toolkit to just hit problems, or as I said, extensive inaction or expensive overreaction. So they were using tools like behavioral science, think about how do we nudge people forward? How do we role model the right behaviors? How do we call out the wrong behaviors without using blame and pointing fingers, or what I would often describe as mass tutting exercises? So the values, behaviors, and capabilities was a defining feature for the organizations that were getting it right. And it wasn't that they were, there's the people, we've talked a lot in British society and elsewhere about the concept of a two-tier justice system. You don't get a two-tier justice system anywhere more clearly than in most organizations. There's a bunch of rules for the executives and a bunch of rules for the rest of the workforce. The disciplinary procedure applies to everyone else, but it doesn't apply to the high-performing star performer. That two-tier justice system in our workplaces, unfortunately, as people perceive it, HR are the custodians of that two-tier justice system, and it impedes trust in the HR function. Now what I'm seeing with organizations I was talking to, and this was universal, there's now a single justice system which applies to everyone, where the values and the behaviors and capabilities are aligned to everyone. They're inverting the pyramid, adopting some of the transformational leadership principles, holding each other and themselves to account. And what I was seeing in the organizations back in, this was so powerful and profound, is the leaders were role modeling the behaviors that they wanted to see from elsewhere in the organization. And that was a significant shift. And what every organization we're experiencing, and this is, I need to do more work, and I want to do more work on this, around building trust and how the people function isn't just building trust in itself. It's building trust in the psychological contract between the manager and the employee, but it's also building trust in the social contract that exists within the workforce. And it's the social contract that's often broken. So alignment of values and behaviors, defining the capabilities, holding ourselves universally to account, a single set of justice models that applies across the organization, and building trust in the people function as a driver of a positive environment for people to thrive, teams to flourish, and the organization to excel. And that was universal. And I can't help even talking about it, getting excited about it, because it just speaks to me about a type of organization where people are going to do their best work.
for those people that kind of looking at, well, how do I get started with this?
Yes.
What are some of the kind of reflective questions they could be asking themselves, their people team, the leaders at the top? How can we kind of get them going, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there's three kind of immediate things that I think can help. The first one is I talk in the book about the development of a culture hub. And the culture hub is a space where we come together to help shape the culture. And I offer what I call 8 strategic enablers to help the culture hub to work. And they have centers of excellence feeding into the culture hub. And I sort of help to reset and upgrade some of those centers of excellence. So the first aspect is the culture hub. The answer to what problem is the culture hub solving? It's solving the problem of who owns culture in our organization. Because it's everybody owns the culture of our organization. But in many organizations I work with, it's nobody owns the culture of our organization. We leave it to chance. So it creates this intentional, deliberate, exciting space chaired by the CPO and or co-chaired with the CEO. And that's helping to drive the culture. You can do that tomorrow. Set up your culture hub tomorrow. There's nothing stopping you from setting up a culture hub and just having a great conversation around culture. I think the second one is go out and gather the data. You know, if your organization is functioning, you've got high engagement, high productivity, your managers are capable to resolve issues, it's high performance, you're managing change effectively, all of your metrics on your people dashboard are flashing green, I would probably say you don't need my book, you don't need what I'm saying. And what's the data telling you? If your organization is resilient, sustainable, fairness, justice, kindness, compassion, the processes are working in the way you want, you've got low attrition levels, high engagement levels, you're attracting the top talent, you're retaining the best customers, your investor sentiment is high. Brilliant. You don't need my book. I mean, I think that's what I would say. But what does the data tell you? And if you do identify areas in your organization where there are gaps, whether it's on your net promoter scores or your talent acquisition or retention or whatever they might be, then it can perhaps support you to drive the changes. So what's the data telling you? And I share in the book cultural audits and cultural maturity indicators to help organizations do just that. The third thing is, I set out in the book, is my green pen, red pen experiment, Becky. And in the book, I simply say, if you're a people professional, get a green pen. I haven't got a green pen on my desk, but get a green pen and a red pen. And with your green pen, just go through your people policy framework. Just pick one. Take discipline or grievance. Doesn't matter. Pick one of your people policies. And with a green pen, mark all of the parts of the policy which are about empathy, dialogue, engagement, connection, insight, learning, growth. All of the things I've been talking about. And with a red pen, mark all of the parts of the policy which are formal, rigid, blame-oriented, sanctions-based, punitive, retributive. And if you've got a couple of lines of green pen, I'd love to see it because I'll put it up as an example of best practice. You'll be amazed when you do the green pen, red pen experiment, just how red your policy is. And that red shows how hot it is and how difficult it is. I'm a big fan of red pen, Becky. I love process. I love systems. I love structure. But we don't have to have it covered in red.
A bit of balance.
A bit of balance and a bit of green pen in there. And if you do that, it forces a conversation. And I can assure you, anyone who's listening to this, who's thinking, how do I do it? Doing that green pen and red pen and doing it in a collaborative way. Bring a few people with you. Bring the unions with you. Bring a few of your employees in. Get a couple of managers into the room. Have a couple of your ER specialists into the room. Get some other stakeholders into the room and have a conversation. And don't see it as it's not trying to pick fault or blamey or negative. It's just saying this is a marker, a symbol that we could do this differently. How exciting, what a great thing to do. What a wonderful project to start 2026 with, is to create a recalibration and a balance between the green and the red pen in your people policies. So create a culture hub. Go and have the conversations and gather the data, storytelling of what's the need, and if you don't need to change, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think is a fair starting point. But if it is broke, then do fix it, and then just take some of your people policies and recalibrate them. And I think that's 2026 taken care of, Becky. I think.
Yeah, that is a very good start. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much. It's been really wonderful to speak to you about your new book and what's inside and the conversations you've been having with those pioneers that are already doing this. Could you tell us more about your book? When's it out? Where can people find it? And how can they connect with you?
Yeah. Well, I'm in this lovely period at the moment. We're getting some book reviews coming in. I've had some really nice reviews. I'm like, so really positive. Dave Ulrich has written a really lovely review. He wrote the foreword to my last book. So yeah, really grateful for the reviews. Really insightful. So that's been great. So it comes out on the 3rd of January 2026. It's being published by Kogan Page. Really enjoyed working with Kogan Page. It's my third title with them. And I'll be talking about it more. I'm launching an initiative called the People Leader, which is launching on the start of December. So that'll align with this, and that's sort of getting the word out around the role of the people leader in our workplaces. So watch this space. So yeah, 3rd of January. So that's gonna be my 2026 taken care of. I think Becky doing a lot of work around the book, and it's on Amazon. Well, it will be on Amazon. I think you can pre-order it already on Amazon, but it's already there, and it's, like I said, published by Kogan Page.
Great stuff. Well, yeah, I do encourage everyone to go and check it out. And yeah, what a good time to buy a book at the start of the new year and start making some positive change. And yeah, I mean, it would be great to speak to you again, maybe in a year's time, and see where we're at, see how we're progressing.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, Becky. I think fingers crossed, and we'll see. But like I said, if it ain't bust, don't fix it. But if it is bust, or is starting to, what better time than now? You know, there is a real imperative for change. There's a lot going on in our world. Let's position the people function, like I said, as strategically that the most important function in the workplace. What a great opportunity for 2026.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.